Hi everyone, this is Halen Danielle with part 4 of my series on emotional dependency. So for this video, it's a little different. I'm not going to be giving you a whole bunch or a few pointers on different aspects of emotional dependency. Instead, I'm going to be filling you in a little bit on my journey with emotional dependency. In my time as an adult, I've seen a number of emotionally dependent people, and I've gotten to the point now, because I've studied this so much and had experiences and lessons learned from it, how to, for the most part, recognize emotionally dependent people, whether it deals with them towards me or just them towards people I know or them towards people I don't really know, and I just hear some details about the situation and I just clue in. I'm like, oh, okay, it sounds like emotional dependency. But there is another reason why I have learned to spot this stuff as well as I have, and why I've taken such a personal interest in it, is because I've lived it, because I have been the emotionally dependent person. And so I found myself in a number of relationships, a number of relationships that were codependent, but then there have been some relationships in my life that were just emotionally dependent one way, me towards them. So if our friendship ended, they would not be devastated and feel like the whole world just is ending, and their identity would not be lost. Me, on the other hand, if and when our friendship did end, I lost it because my identity was wrapped up in some other person. So this started probably when I was a kid. I know the foundation for this happening did start when I was a kid, through different situations and different people, and the ways that I interpreted different clues of life or information. But as far as me actually being more aware of it, as far as it taking me to the point of self-harm and panic attacks, that wasn't until I was in college, roughly 20 years of age. So that was a long road. So I had some really good friendships. I didn't know at the time that my identity was wrapped up in sports, which I did sports from elementary school through college, and then in certain people. And it was mostly people I looked up to who liked me back or enjoyed me back. It was nothing weird for a while, and then it just got weird and unhealthy. But yeah, it was just basically I needed identity, so I found it in sports. But sports wasn't quite fulfilling anymore because it was a lot harder in college, and more coaches not liking me was more of an issue, because in high school they had to have me as a player. In college, I was a little more expendable, so they utilized me only for specific purposes or not at all. So I wasn't as valuable in college, so it was more difficult, and so I couldn't find my identity in sports much anymore. But I didn't understand all this. I didn't know all this was, I couldn't wrap my brain around it like I can now, and I couldn't see it. And so I didn't feel like I was a part of either of the teams I was on in college. So I found other sports teams and tried to blend in with them and kind of be a part of their teams, because I didn't know where I belonged and I didn't know who I was. And that scared me, and it hurt me, and it confused me. A lot of confusion. So emotional dependency brings so much confusion. And so I had some friendships, and they got very, very, very close, and too close, and then I started sucking life out of them, and then I got more possessive and blah, blah, blah. Somewhat. But I didn't get really bad with the possessive part until I had one friendship that was very, very close, and I thought everything was going fine. And then we had a break, Christmas break. Well, I didn't realize over Christmas break that they were conversing with another, it was a friend of a friend for me. And it was a best friend of a good friend of mine. So it was myself and one other person were best friends, and then these two other people were best friends, and then we two were good friends. But we didn't realize over Christmas break those two were talking and got very, very close. So then I come back from the break, and I even come back early because I had an early class that started, and the friend just didn't want anything to do with me. Couldn't figure it out. My other friend comes back, realizes their best friend really doesn't want much of anything to do with them. Do some digging, figure it out. I was completely devastated. I tried to be friends with them. I couldn't do it, and I never did. She, on the other hand, found a way to be friends with both of them and just accept it. And then they all, from what I understand, remained friends after college. Some of them were in each other's weddings. Maybe all of them were in each other's weddings. I don't know. And, well, I still haven't had a wedding, but they wouldn't have been in mine, and I wasn't in theirs. So that was just cut off. I couldn't handle it, and then it was after that I fell into cutting. It was when I was losing my identity as an athlete that I fell into panic attacks, and then it was when I started losing my identity in my friendships that I fell into cutting and other forms of self-harm. So it was an awful time. I got some counseling. I almost got admitted once. Then I went, long story short, fast forward, I moved, got in a little program where you go through lessons just weekly. You don't stay at the programs just one night a week, and you learn how to not be so addicted to something or dependent, or you become emotionally better and healthier. And that worked for a bit. I worked my way through the program. I was doing good. I had a relapse, whatever. Or I just fell apart. It wasn't really a relapse. I just fell apart emotionally again. But anyhow, I went to a girls' home for 6 months. Got a lot of help there. A lot more counseling. Did a lot of good. But then also there was some, I still had the toxicity in me. And that's where I first learned about emotional dependency, but I still was toxic, and blah, 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 fast forward, and I let go of cutting, but then I picked up other things that were just not healthy and from a very unhealthy mindset, and I found out other people who were unhealthy, and I figured out I could basically control them and use them, because they were needing something from me and others. They didn't know who they were. They didn't know what their identity was. So I could use that to make me feel better about not having my own identity and everything. So it was really warped and messed up. And I just did some messed up things to some people, and I used them in wrong ways. But I also did some messed up things to myself, and I used myself in wrong ways. Fast forward a few years, I decide, hey, I don't want to be like this anymore. I'm going to go through steps to go through healing and be free of this. So I do better. But then I still have that, for whatever reason, that need to be needed and loved, and I can't fight it very well. I do better, but I can't let go of it. I cut some bad relationships out of my life, and I made healthier decisions. But I still didn't have my identity secure. I just don't know who I was. I had a dream, but that was about it. Didn't know how to get there, and I just wasn't healthy enough. I wasn't ready enough to get there. So, I had some really good friendships. A key sign of an emotionally dependent person is they will find somebody they like, and they'll latch onto that friendship super fast, super quickly, and they'll want to dive deep super quickly. And I'm a deep person anyhow. The whole, hey, how are you? You pass by somebody, you're like, hey, how are you doing? Oh, fine. You? Like, nobody cares. Like, that's not real conversation. It's just pointless, and it's a waste of time, and it makes it awkward sometimes. Or like you have to do it while you're sitting there talking on your cell phone to somebody else, and then somebody passes by and looks at you and asks you. It's like, and you have to interact. Like, no. Anyhow, I'm a deeper person. If you want to have a conversation with me, I prefer just dive under that surface level waste of time and get to the meat of things. But when you're emotionally dependent, that's not necessarily a good thing, because you just want to, when you find someone who has qualities, say that you want to have your own life, but you feel like you don't have those qualities, so you latch onto that person, dive deep really quickly so you can hook them in, and then you can basically become that person that they are, that you wish you were, and you feel like you're not. You feel like you're falling short in that area. So it was a recipe for disaster for me. So I've had my share of burned bridges over the years, and I won't go into all the details. But even in a few years ago, I had in 1 year, in 1 year span, I had several super close. Actually, I lost two best friends and have several super close, or a few super close friendships. That's it, in 1 year span, and that was the exact year, I think, that after almost 7 years of not cutting, I went back to cutting. The difference this time was that I knew I could quit because I'd done it before. So I knew I could choose to do it or choose not to do it. So I had freedom in that way, but which is important. And I did give it up. I didn't stay with it very quickly because I said, okay, I'm done. So I stopped. But I should never have gone back to it. But also, if I hadn't been emotionally dependent and wrapped my identity up in so many people in in the course of 2 years, then in that 1 year I wouldn't have lost so many people, because I would have approached the relationships differently. I would have seen myself differently and as more whole and more filled. So that's a little dive into my journey with emotional dependency. Happy to say I'm not like that anymore, but my goodness, it took a lot of work and effort and intentionality. I mean, I just got to the point where I was determined not to be that person anymore. So I've kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and drilling myself hard. Maybe a little too hard sometimes, whatever. But that's just my style for myself, so that I don't have to become that person again. I don't have to be bound by emotional dependency again. So I've got my safeguards in place. I know my triggers, and I know what to look out for when I start to go that way. And I'm like, okay, no, combat it. Don't go there. Don't let your emotions run it. You got to run this with wisdom. So the next video, part 5, my thumb is weird. I don't know if you see that, but I broke it a long time ago, so it goes down too far. But anyway, part 5 is going to be about how to get out of emotional dependency when you're that emotionally dependent person. How do you get free from being that person, so you don't have to continue your life being the person who burns bridges, or the weird person, or the person to stay away from, or the negative person everybody cuts out of their lives? You can be whole, you can be healed, you can be free of that. So stay tuned for part 5. Thanks for joining me.